Unit cells and Brillouin zones. I want to talk a little bit more about the reciprocal lattice vectors and try to interpret them physically so they're not so abstract. Then we'll move into the concepts of unit cells and the Brillouin zone. We'll talk about something called the irreducible Brillouin zone. That's really important for computation if we want to minimize the number of computations that we do. And then talk about degree of symmetry and what it means for something to have more symmetry than something else. Physical interpretation of reciprocal lattice vectors. Before we get into this, let's talk about a grating vector. Here we're talking about material properties. So I'm drawing some kind of permittivity profile here. And this permittivity is repeating periodically. And it repeats with a period capital lambda. Well, we can describe that repetition through something called a grating vector. And this is analogous to a wave vector. So though I'm using capital K instead of the lowercase k that we use for waves, it's an uppercase to show the analogy. And we define it the same way. The direction is perpendicular to the planes, and it has a magnitude that is 2 pi divided by the period. So why this 2 pi divided by period? Why do we do it that way? Well, that means we can calculate this profile simply with a cosine of k dot r, where r is vector position. And then, of course, to be a real permittivity, it probably has some average value and some contrast. But the important thing is that cosine k dot r is really what gives us this profile here, this repeating dielectric constant. So that's our grating vector. So our grating vector, perpendicular to planes, magnitude 2 pi divided by the period. Does this sound familiar? Well, remember, this is what we did when we talked about the reciprocal lattice vectors. We were looking at planes in the direct lattice, and these reciprocal lattice vectors were perpendicular to those planes, had a magnitude 2 pi divided by the spacing. So the big aha here is that reciprocal lattice vectors are grating vectors. They are describing how our periodic structure repeats itself. So there's a very, very close relationship between grating vectors, wave vectors, reciprocal lattice vectors. It's very intimate. And for this reason, very often we analyze periodic structures on the reciprocal lattice instead of the direct lattice, which is sort of interesting. And that's just because there's such an elegant relationship between these different vector systems. This is not something we're going to use here, but to those of you that have had a lot of solid state physics and you've talked about Miller indices to identify planes, I want to point something out and make a connection to you. The non-primitive reciprocal lattice vectors, if we look at the integers multiplying our primitive reciprocal lattice vectors, and if we just write these integers, those integers are the Miller indices. So the Miller indices reference different repeating planes in the direct lattice. Unit cells and the Brillouin zone. So a unit cell is a piece of a periodic structure such that if we stacked it onto itself in a way that there's no voids and no overlaps, and we build the full lattice completely and accurately, that is a unit cell. And in fact, when we have a periodic structure, there's lots of different unit cells that we can define. Usually when we do Google searches on this, we see pictures of the conventional unit cell, and these make it very intuitive to look at that unit cell and understand what the full lattice would look like. However, these conventional unit cells are often very large, and we can define unit cells that are much smaller. So imagine we're doing a numerical analysis and we're calculating the electromagnetic field at every point within the unit cell. Well, we can minimize our computations by choosing the smallest possible unit cell. And the conventional unit cell almost always is not the smallest possible unit cell. So there's the concept of the Wigner-Seitz primitive unit cell. This is one way of determining a primitive unit cell. And the way this works is we would pick a point somewhere in the lattice, and we define this volume of space that is closer to that point in the lattice than any other points in the lattice. That gives us our Wigner-Seitz primitive unit cell. We know we've done a correct job when inside that volume, there's only one lattice point. If it encloses any other points, then we don't have a primitive unit cell. So let's just compare some conventional unit cells to Wigner-Seitz unit cells. This is for simple cubic symmetry, and it turns out for simple cubic, the conventional unit cell and the Wigner-Seitz unit cell is actually the same thing. So not much interesting here. If we look at the body-centered, so the conventional unit cell, it's a cube, there's lattice points in each of the corners of the cube and another lattice point in the center. And we're showing that over to the left. That's the conventional unit cell. And if we Google body-centered cubic, that's probably what we pull up. If we construct the Wigner-Seitz unit cell, we can visually see that this is considerably smaller, albeit a more complicated shape. But it's considerably smaller. So numerically, we prefer a smaller unit cell because that shows or provides us a way to do less calculations to calculate the field at every point in a unit cell. Now let's look at the face-centered cubic. So we have the conventional unit cell on the left and its Wigner-Seitz unit cell on the right. And so for all these lattices, I've been showing the direct lattice vectors. But notice the Wigner-Seitz unit cell for both body-centered cubic and face-centered cubic is considerably smaller. We're saving computations by going with a primitive unit cell like the Wigner-Seitz cell. So how is this constructed? Well, what we do is we pick some point in the lattice. And then what we do is we look at all of the surrounding points, and one at a time, we look at each one. So we'll pick a point, and we need to define the area of space that's closer to the first point we selected than any other point. And so, in fact, there's a plane that bisects these 2 points, and this plane is of infinite extent, but I can't draw that there. But it bisects the space between them. We go to the next point, and we look at the plane that bisects these 2 points. And we go to the next point, define a plane, and the next point, and the next point, and the next point. And by the time we've gone all the way around, we've eventually enclosed that point in a volume. And that volume that's left over is our Wigner-Seitz primitive unit cell. And I'll also note that this is also how Voronoi tessellation is done, where we define regions of space that are closer to one point than any other surrounding points. And you'll see Voronois are beautiful in architecture. We usually start off with randomized points, and you get these beautiful looking patterns. Here we have a periodic array of points. They're not random positions. But I just wanted to make that connection. Now the Brillouin zone. So we constructed the Wigner-Seitz primitive unit cell by looking at the direct lattice. But we've also said reciprocal lattice, direct lattice, it's all kind of the same thing in terms of the rules that we follow in each space. So what if we constructed the Wigner-Seitz primitive unit cell, but on the reciprocal lattice and not the direct lattice? Well, it turns out that's called the Brillouin zone. The Brillouin zone is simply the Wigner-Seitz primitive unit cell, but for the reciprocal lattice. So we would not call it the Wigner-Seitz primitive unit cell. We call it the Brillouin zone. And what I'm showing over here is the Brillouin zone for the face-centered cubic lattice. And it's a truncated octahedron, and it's got 14 sides. And if you do analysis on photonic crystals and metamaterials, this face-centered cubic symmetry will keep coming up, and we'll explain why that is. So the Brillouin zone is simply the unit cell for the reciprocal lattice. The irreducible Brillouin zone. Very often, there's even additional symmetry in the lattice. So for example, let's say our direct lattice is a square array of these circles, and we're calculating the field everywhere in this. Well, the field always takes on the same symmetry as what it's in, and you'll notice this lattice, if we flip it left-right, it looks the same. That means the field on the left half has to look like the field on the right half, just mirror imaged. We could flip this lattice up-down. Again, that means the field on the top will have to look like the field on the bottom. And if we combine everything I just said, That means if we look at the field in just one quadrant here, we can unfold that to calculate the field in the other quadrants. Well, it's also, if we look at a diagonal, we could fold it along this diagonal and again see the same field. So that means the field in the lower triangle has to be a mirror image of the field in the upper triangle. And we've whittled this down to this little minimal area that if we know the field inside this region, we can unfold that and reconstruct the field everywhere else. And of course, if we calculate the field throughout a unit cell, then we know the field in all the other unit cells because this is infinitely periodic. So there is this minimal volume within your unit cell that completely characterizes the lattice. So the irreducible Brillouin zone is that minimal volume within the Brillouin zone that still completely characterizes the lattice. So it's exploiting additional symmetry to get there. Now, if your lattice can't be folded left, right, up, down, or other things, then your irreducible Brillouin zone is the full Brillouin zone. But if there is this additional symmetry, we can whittle down the Brillouin zone to this minimum amount of space. And that's what's called your irreducible Brillouin zone. Now we're ready to talk about degree of symmetry. Let's go back and look at our unit cells for the direct lattices. And I'll ask a question. Which of these is the most spherical? Well, certainly not the simple cubic. That's a square. But so we look at the body center cubic and face center cubic. And if we come to the right conclusion, we end up that the body centered cubic has the most spherical looking Wigner-Seitz primitive unit cell. Now let's look at the reciprocal lattices. So the reciprocal lattice of a simple cubic is still simple cubic. And I'm going to ask the question, what's the most spherical of these Brillouin zones? Well, in this case, the face-centered cubic actually has the most spherical Brillouin zone. Because the face-centered cubic lattice, its reciprocal lattice is body-centered cubic, and on the previous slide we showed that the unit cell for something body-centered cubic is the most spherical. But here we're looking at the Brillouin zone, not the Wigner-Seitz unit cell. So the face-centered cubic lattice has the most spherical Brillouin zone. So when people talk about how much symmetry a lattice has, or the degree of symmetry, they're really talking about how spherical the Brillouin zone is. Remember what the Brillouin zone's doing. It's sort of mapping out the periodicity of a periodic structure as a function of direction. So the more spherical that is, the more similar the periodicity looks as a function of direction. So we can make a map starting with lowest symmetry and go all the way up to what has the highest symmetry. At the lowest end, the triclinics by far have the lowest symmetry. That is the least spherical of the Brillouin zones. And we can go through all the 14 Bravais lattices and we'll arrive at the cubic class, which has the most spherical of all the Bravais lattices. Within that, within the cubic class, the simple cubic has the least spherical, the body-centered has the second most spherical or second least spherical, and the face-centered has the most spherical Brillouin zone. So of all the 14 Bravais lattices, face-centered cubic has the highest symmetry. Well, we haven't gone all the way up, so clearly something is beating face-centered cubic, and that's quite interesting. Well, it turns out diamond, which is still face-centered cubic symmetry, but a special class of that, actually has the highest symmetry known of anything that's periodic. So a lot of times you'll hear words like of anything that has a basis. That means if you can define a unit cell that repeats, that is the highest symmetry. Well, I still left a blank here, so something actually has to beat diamond in terms of symmetry. And that's the pseudo-periodic lattices. And it's a lattice where the positions are randomized. And in this case, the Brillouin zones, the shape of the Brillouin zones are derived statistically, which sort of blurs the edges. and we get more spherical Brillouin zones. So of anything known, it's these pseudo-periodic lattices that have the highest symmetry. So in terms of electromagnetic properties, that'll translate into the strongest band gaps, widest band gaps, and other extreme properties. We can do some neat things by introducing randomness into lattices. And if you look at lattices in nature, this is a beautiful example of how randomness can be incorporated. And you can look at these lattices in nature and think, oh my gosh, these are terrible. Who designed these? But that randomness, that imperfection introduces such great perfection into these lattices and very often makes them behave in amazing ways that we just couldn't with things that repeat perfectly. So it's really neat. Nature's a great example.